Ah, yes, the Kitavans. I've talked about this multiple times. First of all, the Kitavans, there's no longevity amongst them, zero. And basically, it's simple. It's explained by simple. Basically, they're not engaging the Randall cycle. So when they consume carbohydrates, they consume some meats. Most of their meats are quite lean. They don't consume a lot, and they pretty much coconut is mostly largely medium chain triglycerides, which convert to ketone bodies. And there's some long chain fats as well that also have reverse electron transport, which actually initiate more mitochondrial density. So that's another aspect. They've got very little mono or PUFA. And in many cases, a lot of these people are consuming 50% of their intake is on coconut. Most of the islands in the Pacific actually usually have about a 50% intake of coconut. They always have had. So most of the actual fruit is seasonal, and most of the actual starch is basically root vegetables and stuff like that. Quite full of fibrous sort of stuff. And then they're quite physically active, so they tend to basically replete glycogen, and so they never really get. And also, they don't constantly eat like us in the modern world. They have a couple of meals a day, and they don't have the excessive amount of energy. They are undernourished in many cases, a bit like many tribal societies have a lot of undernourishment, and so tend to not engage the Randall cycle as a consequence. So they don't have centenarians amongst themselves. So because they are still getting high deuterium foods which does cause damage over time, which creates more senescence and shortens their lives. So they don't live long enough because of higher senescence. But they don't succumb to a lot of modern day diseases. And the reason for that is, simply put, that they're not engaging in the Randall cycle, so they're not pushing up all these inflammatory growth pathways to create more issues. But they do basically have shorter lives. You don't find, there's never been a recorded anywhere I've looked of Kitavans basically being centenarians. Most of the population you find centenarians: Icaria, Sardinia, in the Costa Rican Nagoya Peninsula. All those are pastoralists. All three of those societies are pastoralists. The mountain they're all pastoralists. Even Grundy knows that, and he said that I actually did a video recently on that. They're all pastoralists. Okinawans basically consumed a lot of pork because it's called the island of the Okinawa, means the island of the pigs. They venerate the pig, and they actually say we start the day with pork and we finish the day with pork. All their meals have some pork, but they only eat 80% full. That means they undereat. They deliberately undereat. This is a Japanese thing, not only in Okinawa but in Japan, where they deliberately, it's a cultural thing where they believe they should not exceed, they should be about 80% full. So most of these people are very physically active compared to the modern day Japanese that do actually put on weight because they do engage the Randall cycle and they do a lot of office work, where in the past these people were more physically active and also taking in less energy compared to many others. So they couldn't engage the Randall cycle as a consequence. And they were getting good animal nutrition because they eat everything, even organs and everything, and tendons and the whole lot of the pig, the whole friggin' caboodle. And so they tend to basically also, the other advantages of eating pork is it's higher in thiamine, which means that the extra requirements in energy production to be able to deal with carbohydrates and all that, because there are two pathways and they're both thiamine dependent. If you're just if you're basically oxidizing glucose, you need both. If you're oxidizing fat, you only need one of the pathways, including protein in those extreme points where you've run out of energy, both on the body and intake. And so you need half the amount of thiamine on a carnivore diet, half the amount of so these people obviously eating some carbs, so they need more. But pork is one of the highest sources of thiamine. Also, some of the fish like tuna and stuff like that. What do you think? Japanese consume quite a bit of tuna, pork, those sort of things, high in thiamine, better for energy production. So they've got that covered. Then they've also got the B3, the niacin. Pork is very high in niacin. So is a lot of the seafood, very good source of niacin, very important for energy production. NAD, anybody, which is basically, that is like FAD. It's basically it's a transfer of electrons. Okay, it moves electrons within an electron chain. I'm not going to go into the FAD. I've already explained how it goes back to the Krebs cycle, but anyway, that's for another day. And so basically, you've got a very different state in that regard. You have to nuance these things. When you understand archaeology, you understand all this sort of stuff, you understand the social side. That's when Japanese leave Japan, go to America, and they fatten up and engage around a cycle, and all their diseases go up because they're living a different lifestyle as well. They've also altered slightly what they eat. Some of them not entirely, but they may have increased slightly the amount of rice or some certain things, which they tend to become more culturally sensitive to those things. And so they tend to gravitate a bit more to those things because of the cultural. They're so far away from home. They miss home and they identify those foods with home. So they may consume a bit more. Plus, they're more sedentary because they've changed their lifestyle compared to back in Japan, where there's more exercise, more involvement, more glycogen depleting activities, also under eating, which they don't do in America. So all these, both, it's not only the foods, but also the way you eat the foods and how much, and also the lifestyle factors that have changed. So there are all these. So you've got to nuance these. But at the same time, we look and we see that these people, much shorter traditionally, have other things like that, where other people are more robust and bigger and stronger and all that. Like a lot of our ancestors, like a lot of the Maasai that are very tall. So, there is a cost to lower protein and all that. Now the Japanese, because they've actually more dairy, more animal foods in terms of fish in particular, they've grown much taller and all that in that regard. But compared to the Japanese and the Okinawans, it's just the Okinawans that are the longevity people. And they're being pork-based, not fish-based, pork-based, pretty much. But even some of the populations in the Pacific, like I'm not talking about the other Polynesians in the Pacific area, they also are very much pork-based. Now they're not. Now they're eating a lot of kibble, that's why their health has gone really bad.